Welcome to a Football Show Thursday edition. That is Nick Suss of the Tennessean and Braden Gall, and we are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. We'll have some more details for you about how you can make Thanksgiving super, super easy at your house with the help of both Shotgun Willie's Barbecue and Sinkers Beverages. So, fun stuff. Nick, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm good.
Quick question for
Sure.
you. Is reality TV shows in your wheelhouse? Does that count?
Sometimes it depends on the show.
Okay. I've never watched Survivor, and of course, our colleague Sam, of course, is on there. And I got home a little late last night from an event in town, and as you can tell, I'm under the weather. I don't really do that very often during during school nights, Nick. And I found myself watching multiple episodes, and I thought I'd ask you, does that count? Because you're the TV expert, and I'm curious if that counts. It seems like Sam's doing well. I'm not caught all the way up.
Does it count as television? Yeah, no, it's television.
No. Like, does it count in your wheelhouse of like what the things that you can like?
I watched the first 10 or so seasons of Survivor when I was a kid when they were airing, and then Becca and my wife, started rewatching Survivor because she wanted to get into it, and we watched about the same amount of seasons, roughly the first 10 seasons, and I got bored again. And now she's watching all of them. But she wants me to know from off screen that she's on season 13 right now.
Okay. Only 35 more to go.
Only 100 more to go.
Yeah,
but we are watching this season live. Yes.
I'm enjoying it. So we're going to talk trade deadline today, but I was up late last night watching stupid episodes of Survivor. But Sam seems to be doing well. So continue on, young Sam. We got a lot of stuff to do today on the show, and I have to always try to get a TV reference in as early as possible to try to keep up with you and the things that you love. So there you go. I got it in in the first 3 minutes here.
Thank you.
Trade deadline conversation is swirling all over the place. We've got two huge moves in the NFL with Devontae Adams and Amari Cooper getting moved. The Titans also have a wide receiver on the last year of his contract, and then there's a whole host of other names that we can discuss. So what I really want to get into is not, this is the amount you should get for this player. I want to talk strategy. I want to talk what it means if you were to move some of these pieces. Some of them are very easy to talk about and explain. Some of them not so much. Jeffery Simmons and Harold Landry. So we'll discuss a lot of the pieces that could be available should someone call with the right offer. We'll work through that strategy and what does it mean for the Titans sort of long term. We'll talk about the Bills game. And, of course, we've got this week's game of the century with whoever wins the Georgia-Texas game gets to claim I'll be working on the railroad as their official fight song since they're both the same song. But we'll talk Georgia-Texas. We got Bama, Tennessee. Unsure of who they are still this deep into the season. Not sure what we're going to see in that game. And then are you buying LSU? Are you buying Texas A&M? Are you buying Missouri? Lots of stuff to do in college football as well. However, Sinkers Beverages, serving the community for almost 40 years in East Nashville, 3-time Liquor Store of the Year as voted on by you, the Nashvillians, and they are working with Shotgun Willie's Barbecue to put together wine pairings for your Thanksgiving dinner because Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, first of all, look at that swag right there. You want to know why those colors are what they are, Nick? Shotgun Willie's Barbecue?
Go ahead. I think I have a guess, but go ahead.
Because they're the official barbecue of the Houston Oilers.
Yeah.
It's totally legit. He wanted it to be Titans and Oilers colors. So, Pitmaster Bill, my guy. I had some brisket yesterday. It eats this Black Hawk Wagyu brisket. It eats like a freaking filet. It is so good. I've never had anything like it. Every time I go, blown away by it. Anyway, when he puts up, they're going to turn on this part of the website, but they're working together. This is why we love Sinkers and Shotgun Willie's. They're working together. You can order any number of people, a whole entire meal for any number of people for Thanksgiving through Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. You can, if it's 4 people like me and my family, if it's 8, if you got people coming into town, if you got Friendsgiving coming in, you can put it all. Shotgun Willie's will take care of it all. Sides, main course, dessert, you name it, he'll take care of it. Then you go to Sinkers and you say, hey, I got this many people. What do I need? And they'll say to you, what did you order? Do you have turkey? Do you have brisket? What are you eating? And they will pair with Shotgun Willie's barbecue meal. They're prepared for this. This is called, there's never been a greater synergistic advertising strategy in the history of marketing than Shotgun Willie's Barbecue and Sinkers Beverages working together to make your Thanksgiving easier, Nick.
The kind of synergy to make Jack Donaghy proud. Yeah. No, I glad to learn this. I am hosting my first ever Thanksgiving holiday as an adult. This is going to be valuable information.
Dude, it's awesome. I'm telling you, you just put in the order. He'll have it ready for you on Wednesday. You go pick it up, and then you warm it up on Thursday morning, and you're ready to go. It's fantastic. It is a brilliant idea. I'm doing it because now I have to do the cooking now because my parents are vegetarians. I don't, I've got to do that now. I got to do the cooking. If you had to pick your meats, what are your top 3 meats?
Oh, gosh. I am definitely biased by growing up on the East Coast. I am much more the pork and chicken guy than the beef guy.
That's okay.
But yeah, no, will not scoff at the face of any good barbecue.
So you're going to go pulled pork number 1, smoked chicken number 2?
Usually, yeah.
All right. I'm ribs 1, brisket 2. I want to put catfish in the top 3, but that doesn't count. It's not barbecue. But
I'll put ribs in the number 3 hole. I do like some ribs. And
the holy trinity, of course, at Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, I think, is you got ribs, barbecue, pulled pork. That is the holy trinity there. So ribs, brisket, and pulled pork. Excuse me. So, but the brisket is exceptional, and Sinker's Beverages is going to take all of the stress of the wine out of the deal too. It's just fantastic. It's fantastic. So, more details on that coming up. Okay. I want to talk Bills here, but first I want to talk health of the Titans because I'm curious about. Like one of the things we talked about in the preseason was the lack of depth where there is some star power on this team, which is in the secondary. They added some safeties late, of course, with Adams and Diggs. They went and got some big names via trade and free agency. Well, now L'Jarius Sneed shows up on the injury report with a quad, so he's not out of the game or anything, but it is worth monitoring. You've got Chidobe Awuzie hasn't played in a couple of weeks. Now Jamal Adams is on IR. Diggs has been banged up, but still kind of playing through it. This is dangerously close to going from one of the best secondaries in the NFL to a concerning portion of the team on a team with a lot of concerning portions.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of me that wants to just sit here and say, it's the NFL. You get 53 men on a roster. You get 48 on an active. One injury is going to test anyone's depth. So losing Awuzie was always going to test a team's depth. I never thought they were particularly deep at safety to begin with. I'd be intrigued to see if somebody like Julius Wood could start contributing just because they went out and got him and he's a shiny piece that we didn't see much in training camp. But I have been impressed with Jarvis Brownlee. I'll say that much. Losing Awuzie has not been a drop-off. I think you could make a fair argument that the Titans have improved at corner with the way that Brownlee's played. And I wrote something about Brownlee on the Tennessean. You can read it this morning. It's essentially, he's given up, I think, 21 yards on 6 catches and 2 starts. He is really playing well. Sneed, we can do a full hour on what we think about how he's played because there are some quarters, some halves, some games where I think, that's a top 5 corner in football.
Yep.
And then there's some plays where he gets beat. And a top 5 corner in football theoretically would get beat every once in a while, but the fact that it's happened once or twice a game is obviously not what you want to see.
He's a top 5 corner when Tyler Huntley's playing quarterback.
True. I don't know. I think that the secondary depth was a huge concern of mine at the beginning of the year. I'm not really backing off of that, but it's week 6, week 7 of an NFL season. Every team's going to get tested at depth at positions where you need 7 dudes to win successfully.
And really what it does, and this is to Kenneth's question, it's not a matter of if the Titans have a fire sale, it's just a matter of when and who goes and for how much. If you continue to take hits talent-wise on a team that's already struggling, and you take hits at one of your best positions, the snowball effect here is going to be so great that eventually they do have to really consider making a bunch of moves because, the deadline's November 5th. It's a small day in our community. No big deal. Just a regular old trade deadline day, November 5th this year. It's Tuesday, in case anybody wants to know.
It's a Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday. And by that point, we're not very far off from that. And so the record could get worse, but not significantly. So they need to start these conversations. We'll get into all of that. First of all, before we get to the Bills game, I do want to give J.C. Latham. This was, I believe, broken by Schefter this morning. He tweeted it out that J.C. Latham is donating $75,000 to some hurricane relief in both East Tennessee and Florida. He went to high school in Florida as a Florida prospect. Just love to see it. It's just great. Just want to say good job, J.C. Latham. That's all.
Good job.
Want to call that out and just say good job. But the Bills game, I want you to tell me what the right question is here. What is the right question about this game? Because there is no matchup that makes you feel good. I would love to see Jeffery Simmons and Josh Allen run into each other a few times, or maybe Tavondre Sweat and Josh Allen run into each other a few times. That would be fun television. But what's the right question to ask about the game?
I think that if you watch Bills football this year, which I've probably watched 3 or 4 games, I can't say I've watched every snap. The thing that stands out is this offense isn't really that dominant. It's just an offense that's hyper efficient at scoring touchdowns when it's time to score touchdowns. And obviously that's the most important thing for an offense. So that's like saying, oh, that diamond isn't that shiny. It's just really shiny. Like it's a good offense. But if you look at the yards per play and the yardage metrics and the efficiency matrix and all that stuff, not a super dominant offense. They're just not turning the ball over very much. And they're really good in the red zone. The Titans defense has been successful this year despite not forcing many turnovers and has also been very good in the red zone. So from a pure stat versus stat matchup, there is a world where this Titans defense can counteract the Bills offense. So if you're asking, what's the question? Do the Titans have a good enough defense to play path to victory against an actual quarterback? Because they faced one real quarterback this season, and that was Aaron Rodgers before he got into rhythm on a dysfunctional Jets team. Like Tyler Huntley and Malik Willis and Joe Flacco, these aren't Josh Allen. These aren't guys playing at an MVP caliber quality. So I'm not super impressed by the Bills' overall offensive acumen, the talent at all these positions. Amari Cooper obviously helps it, but like this isn't facing the number 1 offense, facing the number 2. I think they're 19th in yards per game right now. Like they are a good offense that scores at good times. But if you're talking yourself into what's the path of the Titans winning this game, I'll be clear. I picked the Titans to beat the Bills back in May. I picked the Titans to beat the Bills back in July. I picked the Titans to beat the Bills at the end of August. I'm not picking it now. But I spent months saying this is a pretty good matchup on paper for the Titans. And I'm not backtracking from the fact that this is a pretty good matchup on paper.
So 17-10 Buffalo heading into the fourth quarter?
I think I have the final score being 20-13. So that tracks. That really, really tracks.
God, so we're in for another one of those, Nick. That's tremendous.
Until you've probably heard me say this before, people listening, until the Titans prove that the game will look otherwise, I expect the game to look like that.
What's your travel schedule like?
I'm leaving Saturday morning. I'm really bad at remembering to check my flights. I usually just
direct to Buffalo, or what do you do?
I think I'm connecting through Chicago.
Okay,
but yeah, I am usually like a Friday night at 10 p.m. thinking, "Oh crap, I got to check what time my flight is." Like I'm not super good at remembering that.
Oh, the joys of young adulthood, where you have no children and you don't have to worry about all that stuff. What I haven't seen the temperatures either. I know
mid-60s.
It's been so nice in Nashville. I love this week's worth of weather here. So
yeah, it is actually projecting to be warmer in Buffalo Sunday than it was in Nashville yesterday.
There you go, Titans. There you go, Titans fans. Get up there to Buffalo. Always been traditionally under Vrabel. This was a fantastic matchup. It's sort of like how Vrabel got his team up for Andy Reid and the Chiefs. They just traditionally have been very good against this Buffalo team, or at least created very entertaining and good football games. How many of those pieces and players are still here and capable of doing that? I don't know. We'll see. I'm curious what you made. Calvin Ridley had a lot to say. Mm-hmm. I thought in the locker room availability yesterday, I thought much of the commentary after the game, and I think you were there after the game with him, because he would have gotten out of there pretty quick, according to PK, I think. But I thought a lot of it was blown out of proportion. I didn't think he we talked about this on Monday's show. The national media calling it a tirade or a long thing, like none of that was what happened. You can explain it. You were there. That's not how I took any of it. There's something like he had some things to say yesterday about what it means to get into the flow of the offense early and why it's successful and why it's going to help. And like just the thing I took away from his commentary, it wasn't like a weird interaction, but something felt off about it. I think it's tied to the fact that the team hasn't been good. But a lot of we really need I'm paraphrasing here, but a lot of we really need some confidence right now. is a lot of everything seemed to be through the lens of this has been very hard, much harder than I expected. Whether it's the passing offense, whether it's his play, he dropped some passes. Those targets were not good throws by Will Levis in last week's game. I don't know. What'd you make of Ridley's commentary and sort of how he how he is.
Man, let's start off by saying, whether you want to call it a rant or a tirade or frustration or whatever it was, he was fundamentally correct that the Titans are not getting him the ball early in games. Like, I went through every play this season. He's been targeted 3 times in the first quarter in 5 games. He was targeted 5 times in the fourth quarter against the Colts. Like, if we're talking about the content of the discussion, it is true that the Titans are not getting the ball to Calvin Ridley early. Now, Calvin Ridley will be the first to say, and Brian Callahan will be the first to say, that's not for lack of effort. They want to get him involved. That is the company line, that they are trying to get him the ball early. But it's not going right. And I think that's a microcosm of a lot of what's happening for this Titans offense, is that there is a concerted effort for it to be one thing, and it's not that thing yet. Now, you guys have heard me talk about patience and expectation for weeks and weeks and weeks. We thought it would be a long-going process. We thought that getting to the point where this offense was high-functioning would take time. So still granting at that time, still only been 5 games.
Yep.
It's surprising that the guy who is, if not the most obvious, then the second most obvious, oh, that looks like a good receiver, who the team has, it's surprising that they can't get him going. I was really impressed by him in the Jets game. I thought he had some moments in the Packers game, but it just hasn't been consistent. And I'm not putting blame anywhere. I'm just attributing that it's not working yet.
Yeah, no, I agree. And when you go back and watch those 8 targets, it's tough. It's tough to watch. And a lot of it is on Levis.
And let's call it 7 for what it's worth. One of them was just a ball that was batted down at the line of scrimmage, and we don't know for sure was going to Ridley.
And one of them was that deep throw that was almost intercepted because it was so short, and he's
Levis
throwing
thought
off
was a free play. Yeah,
he thought, and he's on his back foot, and he's just kind of throwing it up, and it lands 10 yards from 2 different receivers. So I think they gave that one to Ridley, but it could have been the other guy that was down there too. It's hard to explain. Kaharski's been talking about this. There's just something is off, obviously. But I don't know how much Ridley's portion of this is the thing. Because he's a really interesting guy. Hopkins is a very interesting guy as well. Sure. They're very different, but they're just interesting. And that means that their brains work differently. They see things differently. They function differently. And it's just interesting. And I don't know, we're trying to still get to know Calvin Ridley and sort of what he thinks about and how he operates. And so I think he takes some of it, but I do put more of it on the quarterback right now. But 9 catches and 27 targets is also unacceptable for any receiver as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I asked Will yesterday, look, if you're reinventing yourself and you're evolving as a quarterback and you're struggling, is there a temptation to say, let's just do it the old way then? Do you want to do things the way that I did them when we weren't struggling? And the answer is no from the company line. The camp is saying, there is a method to this madness. We are working towards something. He feels like he's a much better quarterback now. He feels like he's seeing the field better. It's just the result isn't matching what we saw in the couple of games he played well last year. Let's not overstate how well he played last year. He had 2 or 3 good games and a lot of games where he threw no touchdowns and no interceptions, and Derrick Henry controlled the game.
6 really good quarters. How about that?
Yeah, fair. 6 good quarters. But anyone who watched the full scope of Will Levis, I think the people on boots on the ground watched that last year and thought, oh, I see why he's going to be good in year 2.
Yes.
And the thing we saw that made us think he was going to be good in year 2 hasn't been the things he's been doing this year. I think my colleague Gentry wrote a great column that you guys can read at the Tennessean right now that essentially boils down to, hey, remember the confident, cocky Will Levis that everybody thought, oh, his issue was going to be he's too confident?
He's gone.
Where is that guy?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a lost cause. I think that he can regain that, but he is not playing the way. I've said it before. This isn't regression, because in order to regress, you have to do something you've done in the past. This is a new type of interesting for Will.
Well, unless, and I think some of the people out there commenting on this, in the media, I mean, and fans, is that this is sort of what he looked like at Kentucky. Like that there is an element of there's some through lines when he was making the same mistakes at
I
Kentucky.
disagree.
And that's some of the argument. And I disagree if you go back and look at the good year at Kentucky when he is fully healthy and when he's got a supporting cast that is far better than his final season at Kentucky. It's the context around his final season at Kentucky, I think, is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And those two things, like when I talked to Mel Kiper about this, and he was on the show, and I said, why did you grade him out as high as you did even after all the problems? He goes, the guy couldn't run, he couldn't move, and he was hurt the entire final year, and his offensive line was terrible. I was going on measurables and what I saw the previous year. That's okay. It may be wrong, but like that's okay to do that.
Sure.
I think there's some merit to the argument of processing and accuracy, which is what Brian Callahan has preached to us since the day he got here, and how he describes a good quarterback in the NFL. I think processing and accuracy, which are the problems currently for the quarterback, and a little confidence mixed in, some of that was some of the problems his whole career. So I think you can disagree, and that's okay. I think there's some merit to it, not all, but some.
Yeah, I think the reason I disagree is like if you watch the mistakes Will made at Kentucky, a lot of it boiled down to I'm going to throw the ball into the end zone off my back foot and see what happens. Like that is a processing and accuracy issue. And also the interception he threw against the Colts could be considered a processing and accuracy issue, but they're completely different culminations of the processing and accuracy issue. So like he is not a completed finished product yet, and nobody should argue that he is, obviously, but I do think that it is a very different situation of when the dude was turning the ball over at Kentucky, it was almost always because he was trying to throw the ball to the end zone. It was almost always because he was going deep. It was almost always because he thought he had to make a play to play hero ball. That has seldom been the issue this season. It has usually been, I have to protect us from calamity, not I am trying to make something happen.
Yeah. Okay. I get the process is different. The result could be the same if the process is different. I think that's fair. Cody says, did I miss the Jamal Adams release discussion? No, we have not. We have not touched on that yet, but I probably should go back to that. And again, he asked for a release and he was given his release. He is healthy. But clearly they don't view it as an important part of the team because he's been granted the release. So if you have any comments on that, they go for it. But I didn't view it as a huge part of the equation since Jamal Adams has been largely irrelevant to the football team.
I talked to Jamal last week. I'll just say not a huge surprise.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. Quickly here. So I guess final. Any thoughts on the passing attack with Ridley, Levis, all this stuff, and how it should look this weekend? The Bills' defense was supposed to be the problem on the team, and it's been a little bit more balanced than I expected.
That's a good secondary. This is a good secondary they're facing this week. I am deeply, deeply impressed by the group the Bills have put together. I tend to have the opinion that the way to win in the NFL is have the most stars, like legit bona fide stars, and the Bills are rebuking that. Like they have a star.
Yeah.
They have one really, really good football player, and he plays the most important position.
They are in the process of doing the good NFL franchise thing, which is you have a great quarterback, you find a coach you trust, and you have to shuffle old pieces out the door every couple of years, whether it's, a star receiver like Diggs or whatever. Like this is just how the NFL works. If you are a good franchise, you have a great quarterback, you have a quality coach, and you have probably some good pieces along the line of scrimmage, and you just have to filter guys as they age and contract out of the building. And then you got to replace them with young pieces and have them be, indoctrinated into your culture. And that's what great teams do in the NFL.
My fear with Buffalo this whole time was that they would turn into a post 2015 or so Seattle, where you have the quarterback, you can't really afford to keep many of the other pieces, and you're consistently a 10 or 11 win team, but you can't really get past the threshold to be a 13, 14 win team again. I don't know if that'll end up being the case. Obviously, we've only seen 6-7 games of this, but they seem to be bucking the trend of they can still play cohesively without the top level stars, without the Stephon Diggs, with Von Miller suspended, with whatever it is, they're still playing well. I am still really, really impressed by that franchise.
No, I agree. Final pick? 2013, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm picking the Bills close and low scoring.
Okay, before we get into this longer form trade conversation about Jeffery Simmons, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, Harold Landry, Earnest Jones, and more, maybe even Nick Folk, maybe? Question mark. We'll get into all that. Got to say congratulations. So partly why I'm a little quote unquote under the weather is the Best of Nashville party last night downtown. Was quite enjoyable, quite fun. There were many distinguished dignitaries there. Paul Kaharski was there, finished second place. Paul Kaharski, best sports writer in Nashville, second place. Congratulations, PK, on being second. But number one in the market, best craft beer retailer, Sinkers Beverages. That's right there, folks. Sinkers Beverages. Congratulations on being named the number one craft beer retailer in the community. And I believe, if I can confirm this, I believe they are 4 times in a row Liquor Store of the Year in Nashville. So congratulations, wow. Sinkers. Congratulations.
Congrats to them. And you and I stay up late for very different reasons. You were at a high society event, and I was watching Pet Sematary.
I don't... like original OG or the
original one.
Original one's great. It's very, very good. Of all the Stephen King movies, which one do you think was best back in the day?
I mean, am I
allowed the OG ones?
Am I allowed to pick Shawshank?
Okay, I don't know. That's not I don't think of that one as a traditional, like when I was growing up, I was reading Cujo, Pet Sematary, It. Like I'm not going to go all the way to like Langoliers. Pet Sematary was pretty good. It's pretty good. It's up there. I don't really get scared by clowns. Like I know people like clowns are like a thing that either you're terrified of or not. It's just like it's like an all or nothing kind of thing. I don't really get scared by clowns, so the whole concept of it is not really that intense to me. But for some reason, Dead Pets is.
I was terrified of clowns up till I was like 13, 14.
And then you're like, that was stupid.
Yeah, and now like it's so long tangent, but my wife's a huge horror movie fan, and we're doing a 31 horror movies in 31 days for October thing, and she picked all of the movies, and we are unfortunately learning my problem with horror is that nothing really scares me. Like we were watching a movie the other day, and I was like, yeah, that elevated my heartbeat. And Becca's like, that's fear. What you're describing is fear. I'm like, no, it's not. It's just my heart started racing. It's fine.
It's like every Titans fan when Will Levis drops back to pass. It's a horror show. No, look, Sinkers Beverages, guys, please. Liquor Store of the Year, 4-time Liquor Store of the Year, and craft beer retailer. It's the best place to get craft. I've been talking about this giant craft beer fridge, but I'm fascinated by this because I also struggle with horror movies because I also do not get scared by anything because my brain, I guess, just knows, and it's funny because I'm kind of teaching my kids about this so that they can watch movies sort of above their quote unquote age grade or pay grade.
Yeah.
But it's easy for them. Like we've watched all the Lord of the Rings movies like 5 times. Like my kids were 5 and 4 when they saw Lord of the Rings for the first time. They've seen all the Star Wars movies. They love Guardians of the Galaxy. Like we're not big on like putting the filter on the kiddos. Like they have to learn how to exist in the world. And
yeah, they were 5 and 4 when they started watching Lord of the Rings, and they were 12 and 11 when it ended.
They've watched it all the way through. I think they were Legolas for Halloween, I think a couple of years ago. But my point is like it's easy for me to tell. We don't show them stuff with like military guns. Like we're not doing that kind of stuff. It's all sci-fi stuff. But it's easy to say to them, that's not real. Orcs and wizards aren't real. And they like my daughter's like, yeah, I get that. So it's funny because that's what happens with horror movies. Like whether it's Michael or Halloween or any of these movies, Freddy Krueger, it's like, no, this shit's real. It doesn't actually scare me. So I'm asking you, your wife through you, like, is it because she loves the movies because she actually does get scared and enjoys that sensation? Is that
Yes. No, that is absolutely it.
But like, why, how, I don't understand the scaring part. The only movies that scare me are the mental thrillers of like reality, right? Psychological thrillers that can be like something that's like pretty close to true. You know what I mean?
No, I'm essentially in the same boat as you. I'm enjoying it. I'm not saying that I don't like them because they don't scare me. And you guys can watch our spinoff podcast. It's called Nick and Braden Talk Horror. It's like movies, but with a twist. No, we're not going to do that. But
I do want her to tell us what the top 3 horror movies of all time are, in her opinion. Her favorite.
He's putting you on the spot. You have a half hour to think. Top 3 best horror movies of all time.
In her opinion.
In your opinion.
In her opinion. Like, what are her favorites? It shouldn't be that hard to be like, these
her favorites she can rattle off quick, but if she's going with best, it's going to be a different one.
Nightmare on Elm Street, Parasite.
Nightmare on Elm Street, I heard that.
Nightmare on Elm Street, Parasite.
What the hell is that?
Parasite, the Oscar-winning film, Bong Joon-ho.
I've not seen that.
Korean drama where a bunch of people are locked in a basement.
Oh, fascinating. Okay. Nightmare on Elm Street, Parasite. What else?
What's your third one, Beck?
I don't know.
She's
all right.
We'll get back at the end of the show.
Get back to it. Get back. Go.
Sobros Network. Thank you for doing the joke that I butchered. I appreciate that.
What is that from? I don't even know what that's from.
It's a viral post from a couple of weeks ago.
How demure of you. All right, let's talk trade deadline here, and I want to start with Simmons because I find this one to be the most interesting. I can't decide if it's the best idea or if it's a terrible idea. So I'll start with, should Simmons even be in the conversation here?
No, but I understand it. Like, I don't know. I tend to think that if you have somebody who is an actual centerpiece of your plan, hold on to the centerpiece. Like, you trade guys with 1 or 2 years left on the deal because you understand that they're probably not going to be long-term pieces in your overall 5-year plan. They have made Jeff a central figure of the 5-year plan. And I don't know, I feel like being sellers at the deadline is an invalidation of the 1-year plan, which we can talk much more at length about than the 5-year plan. But I don't know, that's a lot to ask to give up the player who is supposed to be the whole of the franchise and start over. The identity right now is, well, the defense is pretty good because Jeff and Sweat play well together. And if you're unraveling that, you're unraveling the thing that you're supposedly building around. And we can talk about the actual like nitty gritty of, well, he's your biggest chip and you can get a lot of assets back and strike while the iron's hot while he's still at an age where you can go get a lot of assets for it and this and that and the other. But it's a tricky proposition to say, this is what the GM decided he was going to build around. This is what the defense is currently built around. Move on. Like, it's hard. It's entangled.
No. I completely agree with you. The two. So one is sort of an explanation of this because also Best of Nashville last night, the best Titans players. Number 1, Jeffery Simmons. Absolutely. Number 2, Will Levis. Okay. Number 3, DeAndre Hopkins. Probably should have been number 2. But here's like, to your point, he is centrally located in every marketing campaign that they've ever done. It's in the last like 3 years, especially since Derrick Henry's been gone, but certainly in the last couple of years. So but I don't know if they had a choice. Like, they're marketing, the faces of the franchise are Jeffery Simmons and Will Levis, the starting quarterback who hasn't proven himself and the best player on the team. The question I have, and if you're going sort of like, let's put the straw man argument up here and say they're going to trade him, and let's like kind of play that game. To me, the argument is you don't think he is the best player on the team. He just happened to be the best player on the team at the time that you needed a face of the franchise. And he hasn't lived up to the contract / expectations that people like me, frankly, put on him when I said, I think he can be Aaron Donald. I think he can be the best defensive tackle in the league. I think he's one of the top 2 or 3 in the world. And that was the case at the time. And it has not been the case necessarily last year or this year. And I don't sometimes PK gets off on these tangents and he kind of digs in on a player, but he's out on this he's out on Simmons as a leader. He's out on Simmons as a central figure that leads them to a championship. And if you are that way and you feel that way, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I think PK can be a little harsh sometimes. Shocking. But I think if you are out and that is your opinion of Jeffery Simmons, isn't this the time to make the move?
That's a real, I'm in my 7th year of a Madden franchise way of thinking about the NFL. Of like, yeah, if these are 1s and 0s in a simulation, this is the correct time. But like, these are humans who have connections to each other. And like, you can be out on Jeff as a leader all you want. Who else? Like, who is going to be that guy that gets respect in the locker room from their teammates? We can leave leadership aside and just talk about gravitation of like, you gravitate toward the dude who's proven he can do it. And I don't know. I think you need that presence. I'm not saying that Jeff has lived up to the contract yet. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, he's Aaron Donald. I never thought he was going to be Aaron Donald. I don't think anyone's going to be Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is the only Aaron Donald. True. But man, I have a really, really tough time saying, yeah, cut your losses. Because look what happened last year when they traded Kevin Byard. When you remove that presence from the locker room, even if he's not the player he used to be, it changes things.
I agree. And I think my personal stance and opinion agrees with you on both of your last two answers, which is he is the central piece. He is the best player. You have to build around him. Don't let those guys go. That's your only hope to being a good football team, or not only hope, but like the main driving piece to being a great football team, let's say the next couple of years. The other side of my brain's like, they're going to suck for a couple of years because they need to draft a quarterback next year. And if that happens, he is not an important piece, especially if he is not elite. So if you believe, if Rand Carthon, the front office, Denard Wilson, whoever, the mental, the round table that's going to decide on this, if they believe that he can be a top 3 to 5 defensive tackle in the NFL and that they are going to be in contention for something by next season, then absolutely you have to keep him. But if you are trying to kickstart a rebuild again, and you need, I don't know what he'd be worth, but because he's under control for like a fairly affordable, I think $18 million next year, and he's only due like 10 or 11 this year, I think you can get a pretty good return for Jeff Simmons.
Probably, yeah. It's such
especially when you have Tavondre Sweat already on the roster to slide in and take a spot potentially next year, not this year.
It's a very tough conversation to have. I understand the rationale, but this is where I go back to the difference between a 5-year plan and a 1-year plan. You made a lot of moves in March and April based on a 1-year plan of, this isn't a rebuild, this is a reload. That's why you get Calvin Ridley. That's why you get L'Jarius Sneed. That's why you get Lloyd Cushenberry. That's why you get Quandre Diggs. That's why you get Kenneth Murray. That's why you get Earnest Jones. These are, this team is ready to play right now moves. And if you then, after 1 year of saying, or not even a year, after 8 months of saying, we made the moves to be good now, to be competitive now, then you say, let's soft reset and try again in 2 or 3 years.
You gotta adapt, and it seems like they painfully miscalculated on that.
Yeah, but it's also a admittance of suckitude, for lack of a good way to say that. And I don't know. This organization has been loath to do that.
Harold Landry's another one in the same conversation. If you have no other, Arden Key has been largely irrelevant. Sure. You have Jalen Harrell has not lived up to expectations. Same kind of thing. You just don't have a Tavondre Sweat on the team to take his spot right now, ready to go. Harold Landry also probably could get you some decent return. Nothing like what DeAndre Hopkins or Jeffery Simmons would get. So but he is, and the price point on him for the next few years is expensive. But he is playing well. He's had a good season, and so far. And he does the only thing, he's the only one that can do the thing that you need him to do, which is put pressure on the quarterback from the outside. It's already a massive priority for this team next year going into the draft. Yeah. If they're in a position to draft a James Pierce, they're going to, those guys are going to be very real possibilities for the Titans. What about Landry as an option here?
My problem with the Landry trade talk is any team that would be trying to add Harold Landry at the deadline probably already has a bona fide number 1 pass rusher, and they'd be adding him as a number 2. And that's a large price point for a number 2 edge rusher.
Well, and I think they can get out of the deal at the end of the season. I think there's an out at the end of the season, and it's like a $12 or $13 million dead cap hit, which is a lot less than $24 million over the next 2 years.
Sure.
But so if you're just renting him, I think it's worth it if you're trying to win a Super Bowl. I think he would be a very valuable asset.
Oh, I completely agree that if you are a team that could use the value of a second pass rusher to pair with an elite guy, Harold is about as good of an asset as you can find. And I totally understand going after him. But again, the money would have to match up. The teams would have to agree on who's paying what.
Yep. Devontae Adams was traded for a third round that could elevate to a second round based on escalators, and Mari Cooper was traded for a third and a seventh. They also gave up a sixth in that deal as well. So really just a third was the deal. So again, that's sort of setting the market for DeAndre Hopkins, who I would argue is not obviously as good as Devontae Adams, but I would trust him on the same level as Amari Cooper, maybe less. But again, a third round pick for DeAndre Hopkins is not crazy. Maybe you get a fourth round pick with escalators to third. That seems like maybe more of a play. He is a valuable piece to help Will Levis develop, but that feels like all he would be for this team at this stage of the season. Is, are you bringing him back? They wanted to have contract conversations in the summer. It hasn't fully happened yet, at least that we know of. He seems like the most obvious piece here that doesn't really, with Ridley and all the other guys that could step in. I don't know how much it affects your team, and Hopkins could go on and have a really great season for somebody else.
Yeah, it's a strange situation where we could go back in March and tell you, hey, things aren't going to work out for the Titans, and it's going to essentially work out that the Titans traded DeAndre Hopkins for L'Jarius Sneed. Can you get that third rounder back? Can you get a high fourth that works for a third? I don't know. He is the one who clearly and obviously makes the most sense, because receiver is a position that every team wants to upgrade. He's on a 1-year deal. The expectation probably was that they go a different direction after the season, though DeAndre does love Nashville. So I'm not going to say it's a foregone conclusion that he wouldn't be back. But this is the conversation we had about Derek last year. This is the one that makes the most sense, of aging but still hyper-productive veteran who is going to help any team that adds him. I can't think of a team in the country that would not be better with DeAndre Hopkins. So, it makes a lot of sense. So
Rand Carthon will probably talk to some other teams and maybe be close to putting a deal in place and then tell us next offseason that it wasn't ever happening. So is that what you're saying about Derrick Henry? Tyler Boyd is on an expiring contract. Mason Rudolph is on an expiring contract. The way quarterbacks are getting hurt right now, maybe not worth much, but maybe. Earnest Jones is a fascinating one as well, because if he is part of your long-term plan, which I would be totally in favor of, and you've seen enough to say, whether it's the injuries or sort of the locker room stuff from the Rams was, if you've sort of answered those questions internally about what he is, you bring him back. I think you sign him long-term. He is an answer at a position of need for the next 3 to 4 years if you want him to be.
Yeah, and the big question with Earnest long-term is just how much faith do you have in Cedric Gray? Obviously,
by the way, full participant yesterday, right?
Yes. Yeah, and obviously you don't compare a 4th-round pick with a guy who has been productive in the NFL for 4 years. Like, there are different levels. But if you do believe that you have a centerpiece figure in Cedric Gray, and that's why you picked him so early, I understand not wanting to hold on, especially when you locked down. How long is the deal with why am I
Murray?
Kenneth Murray? 2 years, 3 years?
I didn't think it was very long. I thought it was 2 years.
I thought it was a 2-year deal also.
I think it's 2 years. So
it comes down to what your views are with the players you just added, because you also have James Williams, who is a developmental player. But I don't know. It's really fascinating with Earnest.
Is there anything about Cedric Gray that tells you that they should plan that they should plan on him being their starting middle linebacker next year? I would say that seems unlikely. Now, if you want to bring back Jones as a number 1, have Murray as your number 2, have Cedric Gray learn next year and the rest of this season to be a starter, and then by the following year Murray walks, and then you've got Jones and Gray. That seems like a very smart, logical progression over the next 2 seasons.
Yeah. No, I agree. I haven't seen the indicators. He was not super impressive pre-injury in OTAs or training camp.
Yeah.
But again, you did invest in him for quite a while and hold out for months before making another move at inside linebacker, because it seemed like the plan was to roll with him. So there is confidence from the organization there.
Tyler Boyd, Quandre Diggs, very cheap pieces, probably won't get you much in return, but veterans that are sort of dependable, you kind of know what they are. Those are also options. Again, now you're in this territory of the roster where it doesn't really affect your current team, doesn't really affect your future team, it doesn't really affect much. You just sort of move pieces if you can get some equity back, in the draft next year.
I would argue that moving Quandre would affect the current team quite a bit. He's played very well,
Okay.
but I do see your point long term.
That's fair.
It's a safety rental. We don't know how valuable safeties are. Mankind has not yet figured out the importance of safety position.
Is it sort of like see, I don't know. I feel like it gets devalued a lot.
Yeah.
Based on contracts and conversations around pass rushers and tackles and receivers and corners. But great safeties have been for a long time in the NFL like the thing that sets the tone on a championship caliber defense.
Oh, completely agree. The reason I say that is there was an ESPN analytics survey in 2022 where they polled analytics staffers and said, what position do you understand the best? What position do you understand the least? And the overwhelming most popular answer for understand the least is safety. The analytics community has not quite figured out yet what safeties do.
Yeah.
Which, because it's really hard to quantify a person whose value is, hey, I make sure things don't happen. Like it's really easy to quantify receiver catch football.
I'm enjoying Xavier McKinney's performance this year.
He's a really good player
for the Green Bay Packers. Big time recruit, big time college player now, of course, high draft pick now, leading the NFL in interceptions. So he can be quantified by the things he does do, which is take the football away, something the Tennessee Titans would love to do. Although a money hooker, shout out, a real turnover, the first real turnover of the season last week. By the way, Dylan Radin's Daniel Brunskill on expiring contracts, worth a lot on the trade market.
Sure.
All right. So there's your trade deadline. So here's the thing. If I told you Hopkins and Diggs were traded, would you be like, all right, fine. Sounds good. Makes sense.
Probably.
If I told you Hopkins and Simmons were traded and they get like what do you think, a second and a fourth, maybe?
Yeah, you could probably
for those two guys
reasonably.
I'd be very interested in acquiring a second and a fourth round pick for those two players.
It depends on who the second was coming from.
Yeah, that's true.
I would want a top 50 pick for Jeff.
I tend to
preferably
agree.
top 40, 45. But I don't know. It's going to be really, really tough to move on from the guy who you wanted to be your face of your franchise.
If you get offered a first round pick, is that sort of the thing that pushes you over the top? Like a late first round pick by a team that's contending for a Super Bowl, you come in and get somebody like that, and you get the 28th overall pick.
Yeah, I don't think it's run to the phone and say yes, good, but I think it's like, yeah, you have to consider it. You have to really figure out how to make it work.
If it's a third round pick for Hopkins, you got to do it. If it's a first round pick for Simmons, you got to do it. If you go down a round in both of those, that's where you start to get like, is a fourth round pick better than having Hopkins help Will Levis all season? I don't know. But probably. I don't know, but probably. All right. Sinkers Beverages, of course, 4-time Liquor Store of the Year in Nashville, Tennessee, as voted on by you, the readers of the Nashville scene. And of course, also just won best craft beer retailer in Nashville. It is one of the best, if not the best beer fridge that I have been into in this entire city. So go to Sinkers Beverages. All the great local craft beers are there. They also got a bunch of craft stuff from like kind of around, right? They got California stuff. They got Asheville stuff. Might be a good time to buy some Asheville beer for a variety of reasons, help support those businesses. And who knows how much more of it's going to be coming. And then, of course, you got stuff from Athens down there in Athens. You got beer from all over the place. You got stuff from Birmingham. So go check out their awesome beer fridge. It's fantastic. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. The brisket is spectacular. Like it is. My wife does not like when I eat ribs or chicken wings in public. First of all, no one's ever looked good eating wings or ribs. It's impossible. Like you could take the most beautiful creature on the planet and have them eat chicken wings and be like, I don't know. I don't know. But if you, I was sitting there eating brisket, just like the other thing that she hates is the noises, you got to be careful when you're eating like brisket that good, when you're sitting at a table alone, you can't moan too loud, like you gotta be careful with that. People will look at you weird. It's delicious though. It is fantastic. And you will make weird noises when you eat it. Okay. Texas and Georgia. This is my question. Why do I think the point spread has gotten bigger? It started at like 3, now it's up to like 5, I think, last time I checked. Texas has been spectacular all season. Hasn't really been truly tested the way Georgia has against Alabama on the road. Why do I think Georgia's going to go down there and win?
I don't know.
Explain that to me.
I wish I could, but I don't agree with you. I do not think Georgia's going to go down there and win.
Okay. All right. Then good. That you're the perfect person to tell to solve this problem.
I watch Georgia and I see a team that hasn't figured out how to be more than a collection of great talent quite yet. I don't see the cohesion that I've seen from past great Georgia teams. They got a lot of talent, and I am not invalidating that talent. I think they have more talent than Texas by probably a lot of measures. Like, that's a more talented team. But Texas is playing better football right now. Like, I know they haven't been tested to the degree that they played Alabama, but let's look at the games where they've been tested on equal footing. Let's look at them both playing Mississippi State. Let's look at what Texas did against Oklahoma versus what Georgia did against Auburn, who we saw Auburn and Oklahoma play roughly equal football teams. Texas is taking care of business to a better degree than Georgia is right now. Georgia is, to my money, undoubtedly a better collection of talent. But I don't take them on the road right now. I'm going to be wrong. I'm so happy that I'm going to be wrong. Kirby Smart's going to put Quinn Ewers in a blender, and it's
that's my thing. My thing. Now Georgia has not been. I mean, Alabama has not been good since that first half of that game either. But defensively, Georgia has not. Like, they gave up a lot of points and yards last week, but I think the defense is going to have a plan for Ewers, because Ewers has these games often where he's either hurt, he gets hurt, or he's just not elite all the time. And I know that's a high standard and a high bar to clear if you're a quarterback, but like, there are moments where he just doesn't look like it. And it's whether it's missing open receivers, a couple of turnovers, and then there's games where he looks completely unstoppable. Yeah, Alabama last year, the Big 12 championship game last year, there's so many times where he gets into a rhythm and you cannot stop them. I think a lot of that is Sarkisian. So I think they've got a great offensive line, which is a great Kirby Smart defensive scheme versus Sarkisian offensive scheme. They're both going to be in their bags on Saturday night. And for some reason, I think Georgia sort of says to them, welcome to the conference, Texas. I don't know. I know it's just, call it like intuition, having watched SEC football for 30 years. I don't know. It just feels like Georgia's going to go down there and play well.
I have the same feeling. This is one where I am going with my brain instead of my intuition. And maybe I should trust the intuition here, but I am currently in 41st place in my SEC picks poll. So intuition hasn't gotten me very far.
Yikes, 41st.
There's like 200 people in it.
Okay, all right. Okay.
But that's
important context.
I am not crushing it. I'm sitting at about a 60% correct pick rate this season.
Alabama has struggled since that first half of the game against Tennessee. Tennessee has struggled with Nico as the quarterback the entire time he's been the quarterback. The problem for Tennessee right now is the quarterback. He is easily confused. He is not seeing the field. He's focused too long on receivers over the middle and is not running the ball the way we expected him to do. The offensive line has had some issues against Florida, which should be alarming. The receiving core was banged up against Arkansas. There's some other context involved in this, but he's still just a very young player who's just inexperienced and hasn't reached the difference between these two teams is Jalen Milroe is elite right now.
Yeah.
Like I read these numbers off SEC Football Live, of course, every single Wednesday on the 440 Sports Network and on podcast apps everywhere. Nico has 7 touchdown passes. That's 10th in the conference. 8.5 yards per attempt. That's 6th in the conference, not in the nation, in the conference. 203 yards per game, 8th in the conference. 149 quarterback rating, 8th in the conference. 65.7% completion percentage, 6th in the conference. He is not a top 5 quarterback in the league.
Correct.
Jalen Milroe, 23 total touchdowns. He is number 1 in the nation, not in the conference. Number 1 in the nation in yards per attempt, 11.2. Number 2 in the nation, 191 quarterback rating, 72.7% completion percentage. The explosive plays from this Alabama offense are fantastic. I think Alabama's the better team. I do think it's strength on strength. Defensive front for Tennessee, quarterback for Alabama, and then weakness on weakness, Alabama secondary versus Nico. So I don't know what to make of this game. I really don't. I think Alabama's the better team, but Tennessee is desperate because if they lose this game with Georgia on the road coming up, this is probably their entire season and their playoff. So I think they're going to play better. Alabama could probably survive a loss here and win out and get into the playoff. So there is some motivational factors here that might be at play as well. And Neyland, by the way, I had the daughters at Neyland last weekend against Florida. We went up for fall break, and the stadium played a huge. They do not win that game without Neyland Stadium against Florida. So it will be a factor. Who are these teams in this game?
I will admit this much. I took a mental health break and did not watch Tennessee, Florida last week. Instead, I rewatched the classic film Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar. Much better use of my time than watching Tennessee, Florida. I cannot endorse more not watching Tennessee, Florida.
So you're suggesting the amount of time and money and effort we invested in getting our two daughters to Knoxville to watch that game and then drive home beginning at midnight Eastern time to get home at 2:30 a.m. Eastern time is not a smart use of resources and effort?
All I'm saying is that Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar is streaming on Hulu. You can watch it anytime you want. And it doesn't involve watching a game that was 3-0 at halftime.
It was such a deja vu all over again moment with the Arkansas game. It was weird.
But to answer the question with some actual seriousness, Alabama is a team that I think is better right now. Again, talent versus talent. I think Alabama has more talent. I like the matchup for Tennessee. In this case, I do really like what Tennessee has because, I don't know, I like the way their defense is playing. Even Arkansas and Florida, I liked the way Tennessee's defense played, especially in the big moments. When they needed to make defensive stops, they have. And that's not me saying, oh, put it in writing, Tennessee's going to win. But I do see a pretty understandable, reasonable path for Tennessee winning.
The defense, very bend, don't break against Arkansas. It was similar against Florida, but was just dominant inside their own 30-yard line and bailed the team out time in and time out because you didn't watch the game apparently. But fourth down conversions, goal line turnovers, you name it, Tennessee's defense held the line the entire overtime negative plays. Like if Tennessee's offense forces its defense to do that again, they will lose to Alabama because Alabama will finish drives in the end zone.
Yes.
And so if they play a similar type of game where they're like, hey, defense, go out there again and help us out. You've already played the entire game. You've had your backs against the wall the whole time and you've made big plays. They will lose badly if they ask the defense to do that again. The offense has got to create something. So I don't know. We'll see. I like Alabama. So
fair. Very fair.
Right. LSU, huge win over Ole Miss. Fantastic game. Texas A&M's got Mississippi State. LSU only a 2-point favorite on the road against Arkansas this week. Tells you a lot about how Vegas views LSU big picture, in my opinion, because I don't view them as I think they're overrated. I think at 6 or 7, they're vastly overrated. I think this is more of like a 11, 12, 13 kind of team. I think A&M's the one that I'm buying right now, moving into the playoff conversation. Missouri's got Auburn this weekend. They've had some flaws. If you got to pick one, because Ole Miss now, I assume you think is done. If between LSU, A&M, and Missouri, all one-loss teams in the SEC, all kind of ranked in the same range, various strengths and weaknesses, who do you like to actually come out of that pack and challenge for a playoff spot?
From that group, I'd say I have A&M 1A, LSU 1B, and Missouri like G-.
G-.
I've never bought this Missouri team. I've talked about it ad nauseum. You guys don't need to hear my rant again. But I trust A&M from a talent perspective. I trust A&M from a Mike Elko's got this team playing good, non-weird football, which is nice. I think you might have an argument that they have the best running game in the SEC, let alone the country right now. But I trust LSU more from a perspective of I think Nussmeier's going to make plays when he needs to. That's
Nussmeier, right there. Nussmeier is very good. And I think I said on this show, he will be a first-round pick next year.
I think I said that, and you agreed.
Yep. We were early on the Nussmeier train for sure. He's very good. Very good command of the offense. You talk about accuracy and processing. Garrett Nussmeier, y'all.
But you also talk about a guy who's like, screw it, I'll throw it deep. It's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, that's fair. There, Texas A&M at Mississippi State this week, 15-point favorite. Missouri, watch out. Auburn will do Auburn things on you, man, if you're not careful. Watch out for that.
And some.
Beautiful disaster in Como this weekend at 11 a.m. Vanderbilt will get a win. They'll move to 5 wins, which is fantastic if they can handle Ball State this weekend. South Carolina, Oklahoma is fascinating just because Oklahoma's quarterback situation is interesting to watch. So let me go back to Ole Miss, and I'll wrap up on this because I just want to hear your opinion. Is this a referendum on the roster strategy of Ole Miss that we've got a verdict on now that it cannot work? Or is it a non-blue blood referendum that Ole Miss cannot compete, like the way Lane Kiffin talked about it last year? Hey, we don't have enough 5 stars. Even if you do get 5 stars, they're from the portal. They're not real 5 stars. I don't know. Is this a referendum on Lane Kiffin? What is the? I have my own opinion, but I'm curious where you fall on this.
Am I allowed to say it's not a referendum? Like,
yes, you may.
I think that the strategy of building through the portal can get you to a 12-team playoff. I don't think it can make you a consistent year in, year out top 4. But if the question is, do we have enough money in our collective to once every 3 years pay for a team good enough to make a 12-team playoff with a 10-2 record? Yes. Like that's feasible. And I think you're going to see teams do it. I think Ole Miss gets in trouble about it because they are the most public about it. They're the most open about it. USC's doing it and LSU's doing it. And you got a bunch of schools that are following the exact same trajectory. Ole Miss is just brazen about it. I think Kiffin is the guy who he's been for a long time. He's probably going to win you just about every game you're supposed to win. And it's going to be a dogfight that you come out not winning a lot of the times when you're not supposed to win. The Kentucky game was much more of a referendum than the LSU game. Losing Saturday night at Death Valley. I've got a friend who's been to probably 100 LSU home games, and he had that game on Saturday rated as the second best environment he'd ever seen at Tiger Stadium. So,
it looked like it.
That's a tough place to win. And I'm not giving Ole Miss, oh, how dare you not go to Baton Rouge on Saturday night and win? Like, most teams don't do that. That's kind of reserved for Saban's Alabama teams and nobody else.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm not out on them, but if they don't beat Georgia, they're not in the playoff, and that's not a game that anyone expects them to win. So Kiffin's going to have the best win of his career.
I guess the only slight disagreement I have is I don't think it's a referendum on Lane Kiffin. I don't think it's a referendum on blue blood versus not. I don't think it's a referendum on Ole Miss in general. I think it is a referendum on the strategy that you cannot build a championship caliber team with mostly portal players at a program of that level and expect to compete. And because the rules are going to change here soon. This is the only window of college football's history that we're going to have these types of teams. I think it has to be a part of your strategy on top of great recruiting year over year with high school talent. I don't think you can recruit the 23rd best class every year and then try to build a portal team on top of it. I just don't think you can do that.
Sure, but I'm looking at it from the perspective of stop thinking of it as championship or bust and start thinking of it as you'll be proud to make the Sweet 16.
I agree with you, but that was not what Ole Miss was paying for this year. They were paying for championship or bust.
This is what Ole Miss was paying for. Let's not delude ourselves. Ole Miss wanted to make the playoff, and they still have a chance. They got to beat Georgia,
and the Georgia games
they were paying to make the playoff. If they don't, it's a failure.
And the Georgia game's at home. I think we're close to calling it a failure. I'm just saying. All right. Enjoy the SEC this weekend, of course. Tennessean.com. What you got coming for the good folks over there?
Yeah, got a fun story that you can read tomorrow about Tyler Boyd and his relationship with Damar Hamlin. The two of them go way back from their days growing up in Pittsburgh. So feel free to read that. Feel free to read the story I mentioned this morning on Jarvis Brownlee. I'm trying something this week by writing about people not named Will Levis. So let's see if
what a unique strategy
refreshing to the audience. And I am just getting some late breaking news from this very real sheet of paper that's handed to me.
Number 3 on the list.
Number 3 is between Jordan Peele's Us and the Australian The Babadook, but The Grudge is the movie that scares her the most.
The Grudge. All right. Okay, I like Us a lot. That's a good one. I like all of Jordan Peele's stuff. It's creepy. I like it though. It's just sort of like just makes me smile. it doesn't make me like freak out, you know what I mean?
She also enabled me to quote my favorite TV quote of all time, which is I have 2 regrets in this world. I regret being born dead, and I regret seeing the Babadook. Do not see the Babadook. That shit's scary.
What is that from? Is that from like that sounds like a 30 Rock quote or something.
That is from the FX show You're the Worst, season 2, episode 13, Born Dead.
That was close. I watched a bunch of FX stuff over the fall break. I watched all of Shogun. Very good show. Enjoyed that. Okay. All right. Tennessean.com. Sinkers Beverages, of course. Congrats on all the best of stuff. You got Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, the best brisket in town, full stop. Also, they've won best of 3 different times. It's fantastic stuff. So go support 2 great local businesses in Nashville. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue up there in Inglewood, right off Bradley Parkway. Super easy to get to, not even like 6 miles from the Titan Stadium. You can get there very easily. Lots of big arteries going there. And of course, Sinkers Beverages, along with Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, serving the community for almost 90 years. So go support good business. For Nick, I am Braden. Safe travels, my guy. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend, everybody.